Good evening and welcome. I'm Chuck Roberts, the Vice President of Operations for the Metro New York chapter of the National Black MBAs Association. And again, welcome. We have a great event on tap for you tonight, and I'm very pleased and proud to be the opening person for this event. I got a great team here. I guess I can say that. And the topic of cybersecurity is where we're coming from this evening. Um, as part of what we consider to be our mission here at the National Black MBAs, we're always thinking about the community we serve and how we can better inform and give them opportunities for advancement and for things that they may not even be aware of, such as cybersecurity and for placement in that area. So we're putting on tonight's event with the experts. You'll see that folks that are on the team have tremendous backgrounds and are willing to share their thoughts and their journeys and give you some insight on this topic of cybersecurity and cyber attacks. Demystification of cybersecurity is what we're calling this tonight. So I'm not going to hold the ship back up too much because there's lots of ways of connecting with us tonight. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're someplace else, which I don't remember right now. We're also on Zoom. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to have a one of our panel members. Her name is Ashley. Ashley, and she is going to talk about. I'm sorry, Ashley, I missed your last name. Ashley Richardson Sequoia, right? Did I
Got
say that
it.
correct? Got it right.
Good.
And she's from and she's from Palo Alto Networks, and she's going to do a couple of opening comments. They're our corporate sponsor for tonight's event, so thank them. If you can go out and buy their product, go ahead and do so. You have our endorsement. We're very happy for that. If you want to work there too, you can do that too as well. There's a lot of good things that we can get out of Palo Alto and HP and all these other companies that are here tonight. HPE, I know better. Without any further ado, let me introduce Ashley Richardson Sequoia, and she's going to talk a little bit about her company. Hold on a minute.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm so happy to be here. I mean, we hear about all this fancy cybersecurity stuff in the news, and it impacts all of our lives. So Palo Alto is so happy to stand with the National Urban League, especially towards our mission of increasing inclusion and diversity as well. I mean, I'm standing here as a testament to the mission of the company. So I really hope that after this, you get a chance to come check us out. And if you're interested in any careers or any other questions about us or what we do, please bug me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk with you. Thank you so much, Chuck.
We are the next
generation of visionaries,
rule breakers, game changers,
and world leaders.
We were built to perform on the biggest stages.
But we certainly aren't here to do what's been done before.
And neither are we. At Palo Alto Networks, we are ready to secure our digital future. As companies innovate to transform, we innovate to outpace cyber threats, so you can embrace technology with confidence and make the next day safer than the one before.
We've got next.
All right. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for sending that video over to us. Next person in the lineup here is my dear friend for a long time, and I'm very pleased and proud that he actually accepted this invitation to moderate this program. But I couldn't think of anybody that's any wiser or smarter or just on top of things when it comes to IT. And I won't say how many years he's got in the field, let him tell you that. But he's been around for a while doing this stuff. He's with HPE. He was with them when it was HP. I remember that. I'm actually looking at my HPE laptop because he keeps telling me to buy one every year. So I keep doing that just to make sure we keep the money in the family. My dear friend, John Bay Clinkscale. Thank you, John Bay, for moderating the program tonight.
Thank you, Chuck. My job here is actually very easy. We have an esteemed panelist here, and I'm so pleased to have this privilege. As Chuck mentioned, he and I go way back, so whenever he asks I say yes. And I'd like to lay out what we plan to do today. So as Chuck mentioned, we're hoping to demystify cybersecurity. And in order to do that, we're going to cover 4 areas with our panelists here. We are going to start off by setting a foundation and kind of defining what cybersecurity really is. All of us probably have our own ideas. We'll get some definitions from these experts here. And then we'll move on and have them spend a little bit of time about their journey and how they ended up being in cybersecurity. Some of us, at my age, when we were in high school, didn't know anything about cybersecurity. So how did they get into security? And then after we understand how they've done it, it would be great to share with our audience how you can get into cybersecurity if you're not already in that area. We also want to give you some tips and best practices that you can use at home, as well as some tips and best practices you can use in the office. And then we will close out with some key takeaways. There are going to be a bunch of golden nuggets and dropping knowledge taking place tonight, and we'll summarize that with you. So those are the areas we are going to start with. So what I'd like to do is now start with the first questions around the foundation. And when I thought about cybersecurity, I think everybody kind of knows what security is, but let's talk a little bit about the boundaries of cyber. And let's start with Ashley, and then we'll have Mukesh, and then Michael. And as you start your answer to defining what cybersecurity is, panelists, please just give a little introduction as well. So first, let's start with Ashley, introduction and defining what is cybersecurity.
Sure thing. Thank you so much. So I'm Ashley Richardson Sequeira. I am joining you from sunny California. I have been with Palo Alto Networks for nearly 4 years, and I can tell you that working in cybersecurity absolutely changed my life. I'm working as a senior technical trainer for security operations. And when I tell you that not even 5 years ago, I was answering phones and folding shirts at Old Navy, you'd never believe that I'm actually here right now. So I'm here to tell you that there's absolutely hope. Now, as far as the idea of cyber, personally, I really think of when we think about just cyber as what that even means, it's the amalgamation of the various use cases that we find for technology. As a society, we're extremely technologically dependent. And, cyber is way past just the ARPANET or just DoD handling, what the internet looks like. We're all on the internet. Our kids, heck, our pets and coffee pots are on the internet with us now. It's so different. And so as we become more connected, we actually expose ourselves to more danger. COVID-19 showed us that there are no boundaries to cyber. We're all a target in the current state of affairs. Every person connected to the internet stays at risk, and every device. How many devices do we all have near us right now that connect to the internet and do things? Even if we have nothing to hide, there's always going to be leverage for the bad guy. So when I think of cybersecurity, that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you, Ashley. Good answer. And Mukesh, your introduction and your answer to what is cybersecurity, please.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. And actually, that was wonderful, by the way. My name is Mukesh Makwana. I'm a senior security architect at Bridgewater Associates. Unlike Ashley, I am not in California. I'm in on the East Coast in New York City. So calling live from there. I've been with Bridgewater now 7 years. My role there is largely in the space of security architecture, helping people design secure systems from the ground up. So that's my bread and butter. As Ashley indicated, we are in a fully connected universe, right? The metaverse, as people keep on calling it, which is the new NFT word for things out there that people are purchasing in the internet of worlds. Cybersecurity largely focuses on technologies therein that connect us in our day-to-day lives. It's the servers, it's the networks, it's the applications the business use cases that drive the need for these technologies in the first place, be they personal business use cases or business themselves. But security extends beyond that. Like cybersecurity is just one dimension, right? We always forget about the fact that someone can still steal your phone, right? Like they can just walk in and do you harm, right? So that's why, when you talk about security, you have to put it in the super context, the context that technology is just one dimension. You also have to think about the people aspect and the physical aspect as well, protecting your buildings, your data centers, so on and so forth.
Thank you for that answer. Good answer, Mukesh. We appreciate that. And Michael, please, would you go ahead, do your introduction and define cybersecurity for us?
Sure. Michael McNeil, I'm the Global Chief Information Security Officer at McKesson. Been here at McKesson for about a year and a half. Prior to that, had been a global product and security as well as privacy data protection officer in a few different medical device organizations in the healthcare space. I've also had security and data protection responsibilities in insurance and some of the software development within the automotive space as well as in the manufacturing. So I've sort of been around this block, a time or two as things have evolved and as you see different things. I think both Mukesh and what Ashley had stated, is extremely critical. There's a combination of the ability of having connectivity. So that is clearly one common thread as I look at the definitions. And then also when you look at the connectivity, you talk about some of the boundary areas, specifically when you think about information, the ability to access that information, the ability to manipulate that information, the ability to leverage that information as it is connected into technology so that you can potentially look at that from a threat vector and/or to be able to compromise based on that type of information. Mm-hmm. So again, when you think about the boundaries and you talk about the cyber from a security perspective, it is all the different devices, all the technology, all of the dependency that we have around that connectivity. And then when you add to that, how I can access and how I can then manipulate and then, compromise based upon what that information is. And then as you think about it, information is sort of key. It's like your crown jewels, as we would state.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So that really capped a great definition of what cybersecurity is for our audience. And so let's talk a little bit about each panelist's journey and how you got into cybersecurity. I'll start with you, Michael. You did mention that you've had several data protection responsibilities in previous roles. But take us back, and when did that idea or this first role in cybersecurity happen for you, and what was that journey like to where you are now?
Yeah, it's very interesting because one major shout out, to National Black MBA Association. I am a lifetime member. I've lived in a number of different environments based upon, work opportunities, always have maintained a strong connection within the organization. I am currently a national board member for the organization. So that is sort of my kind of foundation. So I am an MBA, Northwestern grad, undergraduate from the University of Illinois. And my career, before you even knew or heard about anything talking, about cyber, was in product management, product development, software, developing, solutions. And I had an opportunity when there was some privacy and security implications in the financial services sector at the company I was at to actually work on putting the business case and how you would look at addressing it. And so you immediately had to immerse yourself into a new type of an acumen. And so I had to get educated. I had to go through and get the right, acumen on the technology, on the solutions, looking at the cyber environment. That was about maybe 20 plus years ago right now. It was right after Y2K, if some that do know and had to deal with that from an experience perspective. And I approached it from a business perspective because I was looking at it for my company and how we could then make it a competitive advantage with our customers and to be able to secure the enterprise and its environment. And so it led to me developing the plans, executing those plans. But again, I state all of this because it was based on my foundation from a business, perspective and a general manager perspective when I got into the cybersecurity space specifically.
Okay, that's great. So do you consider yourself a cybersecurity expert or a cybersecurity executive? How do you define yourself within cybersecurity?
You know what? Here's the critical piece. In order to get to an executive positioning and level, you have to be able to have business speak. I represent the corporation. McKesson is number 7 or 8 in the Fortune 500. I meet with the board of directors and with our executive officers on a quarterly basis at a minimum. I do training for them. We have tabletop exercises. I need to be able to translate what the impact is around cyber so that it makes sense to the business, to the leaders, in order to fund and spend the money that we need in order to protect our environment. You also have to have the technical chops in order to be able to manage the department, manage the area effectively so that you can understand what the business and what the opportunities are and how to select, the best set of solutions and technologies in order to manage your particular environment, your customer's environment in my particular case, and in order to do that. So I think it's a good combination. I've testified before Congress around cybersecurity in terms of the Health and Human Services and in front of Congress specifically. So I guess in order to get to Congress and when they stand you up and you get sworn in and you're testifying as to why your devices or solutions, might have security implications of it, you need to be able to have some kind of an acumen from a technical perspective. But when you climb the ladder, there is definitely a strong need to be able to relate to the different audiences in order to develop and then get execution within your programs.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michael. That's great. And so, Mukesh, let's go over to you. I would say that you are a cybersecurity specialist. Would I be wrong? And when did you kind of get into a focus and an interest in cybersecurity?
By accident, I'm gonna say. That's how usually good things happen, by accident, right? Yeah. It was like 20 plus years ago. I am by education a physicist. I have a master's in physics. I was on a path to do a postdoc kind of like course, but decided to pivot. I spent 4 months heads down doing research and decided that being in a single office, scrolling things on a whiteboard wasn't for me day in, day out. That wasn't what my life was supposed to be. So 20 years ago roughly, I pivoted to wanting to work in finance. Like everyone that comes out of college, I say, hey, I want to work in finance. This is going to be great, right? So I popped out of school and did an internship initially with Morgan Stanley. And I went to Imperial College in London, so I'm born and bred in London, if you couldn't tell from my accent. So post graduating, Credit Suisse had a phenomenal graduate training program where they accept you onto the program. And then you interview your potential positions within Credit Suisse London to find a role that fits you. So you're not only being accepted into the program, but you get to kind of accept your manager, the role, and what you will be doing from a day in, day out perspective. I interviewed like five managers at that point, and then came across a security position. It was a security engineering position. And I knew nothing about security. I knew very little about IT back in those days, right? I'd probably done like a couple of programming courses whilst doing my physics degree. So very green field, but it sounded great. And the reason it sounded great was they were doing something that not many organizations in 2000 were trying to do, which is overhaul and be secure from the ground up. So they were building platforms, ensuring that those platforms would be integrated with business applications, and had top-down senior sponsorship from the exec board all the way down to do those things. So I would be responsible for building those things, owning those platforms, selling those services to business teams and application owners, and then working across teams in New York, London, and Switzerland. So that sounded great. Like on the face of it, I'm like, this sounds phenomenal. Sign me up. So they signed me up. I spent a good 12 years at Credit Suisse doing a myriad of roles. Security engineering, risk management, then tethered back to architecture, like strategic enterprise and security architecture. And going back to the point that Michael made, like, I broke ground, right, early on in my career. I was taught by seasoned professionals. I got to experience what it meant to operate security controls, make risk decisions. And that experience and knowledge helped me kind of build up a position where I could then direct, shape change. And that's what I did towards the end of my tenure at Credit Suisse, like shaping change, moving people in the right direction, ensuring that the right investment choices were being made. And that kind of carried me on to Bridgewater today, where I do similar things, where my role and remit is to help people make the right choice. But it was hard. It took me 20 years to get here.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight, right? And you're gonna fall. You're gonna fall plenty. You're gonna make mistakes. And someone will be screaming at you at one point.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be okay.
And so what was the last thing you got screamed at about in your day-to-day? Talk a little bit about your team and some of the things that you have to deal with.
So I'm client-facing, internal customer-facing. Be that. So I'm consider me like an embedded consultant, if you like, where there is a business ask. Hey, we want a new internet-facing web application. Great. Like I sit down with them, figure out how to best engineer that and architect deploy it, such that we minimize threats. Like we spoke about threats briefly right at the beginning. The notion that a vulnerability, a weakness in one of these platforms could be exploited, right? Minimizing that, just figuring out what that is. And what generally happens is there's a healthy tension between security and the business, right? Like the business wants to move really quickly. They want to have those features out there. Security is kind of like, doesn't need to be a blocker, it should be an enabling function. But you want to slow them down to make them think about the choices that they're making and the implications of those choices. That's the real key there. So when I say shouting, I'm being very hyperbolic there, but it's that healthy tension between kind of like business wanting to do something and you saying, hey, that won't be a great idea because, do you want to see what happened to T-Mobile? ...
Yeah, right. That's a great answer. Thank you, Mukesh. And so, Ashley, as part of the sponsor, we know that you are a specialist, and I had the chance to look a little bit on your story and how you got to where you are today. But tell us a little bit more about how you ended up being at Palo Alto and considering yourself a cybersecurity specialist.
Sure. Is everyone sitting down? It's a good story. All right. So So I will start off by saying that, like most millennials, I am a proud member of Team Get Off of That Computer from 1994 to 2006. So
Oh, wow.
for me, I was on the internet like super early as a kid, and my dad worked as an engineer at a well-known utility company out here. So we were like the first kid in my elementary school to have a computer with like AOL at the house. So like I was everyone's favorite person then. So, fast forward, the movie Hackers came out. I've watched it too many times. I don't even have to be looking at the screen, and I can tell you exactly what's happening by like where the music is in the movie. So I was just always so fascinated by technology, like, totally a gamer, absolutely was always getting yelled at for messing with the family computer and reprogramming the VCR and all that kind of stuff. But as an adult, it was a lot different. It did not look how I expected it to. So I actually went to UC Berkeley on a full scholarship, and I dropped out. I dropped out because I wanted to do actual IT, and a lot of universities, it's great that they have computer science. It's great that now in 2020, 2021, we have cybersecurity degrees, but even 10 years ago, that wasn't a thing. If you wanted to learn IT, your choices were to get a computer science degree and hope you might have learned how to fix a printer, but 9 times out of 10, you were just going to learn how to print Hello World. Right? Like the skill set didn't match with the investment. So I left. And so I was in the Army Reserves, and I had been retrained in IT. I actually enlisted in the Army as a trumpet player, believe it or not. And I was a paid musician for a while, but we're in the US, not in Europe, where they actually pay classical musicians great money to be talented. So I knew that wasn't going to pay the bills. I knew it. There was no way that was going to happen. So the other thing is that, I was living in the Bay Area, and up until recently, it was one of the most expensive places to live in the country, if not the world in some cases. I was working, retail jobs. I had 2 part-time jobs and a full-time job just to try to afford a little studio apartment in East Oakland, and hoping that it wasn't going to be a night of violence for me because of just the nature of how expensive it was. And after that, like, it got really tough for a while because I was trying to get certs. I was trying to figure out how to get money for school. I ended up running out of money by the end of 2015 because I was also competing to qualify for the Olympics in Taekwondo at that time. I was completely broke by the end of that quad. So I had to come home, and I was very much too prideful to go home to my dad at almost 30 and go home. So I slept in my car. I used to always make that joke. I'll sleep in my car before I go home. I really did. And so, obviously money was a concern. And so I started doing research, and, I figured out pretty quickly, I'm like, everybody does IT. What is something that no one else does? And so I started looking at jobs, and I'm just like, okay, information security. There was like 10 times the positions, and the pay was like triple. And I'm over here fighting for peanuts when I could specialize early and boost my salary and make it so that I'm not worrying about how to put gas in my car to get to work every day. And so that was kind of like the first kind of light bulb where I'm like, okay, I need to figure out how to like actually get into cybersecurity, because it's not like before where if you're poking around on a server, you're going to jail. Like, they're actually paying people to break their stuff now so they can protect it. Like, wow, I can get a job and not get in trouble. Great. So I got my first break actually when my now husband actually invited me along to check out DEF CON. So DEF CON is the biggest underground hacking conference in the world. And, a little Black girl from, the hood in California does not think that there is a place for her at a place like DEF CON, but wants to go anyway. Man, there was a place for me. I went, it was terrifying, but I saw people that looked like me. There were leaders that were just like, no, this is for everybody. Hey, you look interesting. Come see about this cool tool. Also, don't plug your computer into anything because it'll probably catch on fire or something. So for me, it's about wanting to know why and kind of like, okay, well, why can't I put my computer in there? That seems interesting. So I got my first SOC position, which is a security analyst position, and learned all about threats, learned about, a little bit of the offensive, and paired it up with the defensive skills that I already had. And so now, fast forward to 2017, Palo Alto Networks, is big on hiring vets at the time. Still big now, but we were really focused on trying to help with vets because as we're now seeing with the fallout in Afghanistan, a lot of our vets are coming out of service with no skills and they can't participate in the job market. So Palo Alto was like, hey, we're going to train vets. I go to this class and I'm just like, wow, look at how happy everyone is here. And there's glass everywhere and everyone's smiling and there's sunshine. I worked at Apple, but it was in a call center. There was no windows, so I wasn't happy. And so I'm like, wow, there's sunshine and all this great stuff. So I'm in a class for veterans and I get pulled out during the class. And the person who led the program thought I got in trouble or hacked into something. They were trying to interview me to come work for Palo Alto.
Yeah.
And so I made it in originally as a technical trainer. And since then, I've done professional services engineering, so firewall migrations, threat assessments, VPN installation, breach assessments, like all that kind of stuff. And then I even spent time as a systems engineer for security operations. So in a very short period of time, I literally went from folding shirts to now being a practice lead for the education team at Palo Alto Networks.
Yeah.
And remember, was sleeping in my car not even 6 years ago. And so now I'm here. It's just like, wow, this industry is literally changing lives.
Yeah, that's a great story. So as a practice lead and you set up classes and you influence the curriculum as well?
Yeah, so I have a say in our curriculum. I have a say in what information we actually do present to customers. I mean, thinking about it from, say, just like a network security perspective, we actually have to talk about security operations because you have so many teams that have to be a part of that conversation in order to have an effective practice. So I spend a lot of time listening to really smart people like Mukesh and all of our friends here on the call, and then explaining that to people in a way that makes sense to them so they can understand how to deal with that. Yeah. It's important. Like being able to articulate that is a skill that is super underappreciated. And I think a lot of people don't realize is an in into this industry.
Yeah.
Because if you can explain, if you can understand and you can explain, you're in. Like most people can't do that.
Right. So thank you, Michael, Mukesh, and Ashley for telling us a little bit about your story and a view into your role. So let's shift over to opportunities. Let me preface it by saying a few years ago, I had the privilege to run the network team for Bank of America in Midtown Manhattan. And we had a team of network specialists and we were helping folks get their CCIEs and their other networking certifications. And I remember one of the comparisons they made for the CISSP was that exam was all written. And you had to you go in and do a pencil. It wasn't on the computer in the early days. So let's talk about opportunities and certifications. Is the CISSP still like that? And if you were going to recommend a way into cybersecurity for someone, what would you suggest they go study and get certified on? Anyone?
That class is always a great place to start from, honestly.
Again, it just depends on your trajectory. I think that class, and again, it's not a pencil kind involved it. So, but the CISSP from a certification, for me, it's sort of foundational. And here's why, because, as Ashley said, it allows you to demonstrate that you also have work experience in order to take the exam, because I think it's around up to 7 years. Plus you have to, so you're demonstrating that you have the experience which you want to have, like she said, the offensive, defensive, combining those elements, and then understanding some of the other basics as that from an exam. Now, I look at it and leverage it for at least my mid-range and upper mobility of a foundation when I'm looking at for hiring someone. So if they're going to be in a manager or in a lead or some of the roles, like Ashley said, I want to make sure that they have a CISSP. When I'm looking at someone starting out maybe from undergrad or have other certifications, because you can now get courses and everything else even in school today, or not, I would look for them looking in a role, like she said, which is the SOC, which is our Security Operations Center that we typically would have. And so those are the ones that are monitoring and gaining some of that expertise and building upon it. But I would not necessarily require, everybody coming straight out and some of my, level 1, level 2 type of analysts to have, a CISSP as an example. But again, I think you cannot beat foundationally what you just described as you're going to move around and have, a full career, whether or not you're client facing or within an organization without that type of a certification.
Right, great.
The only thing I would add to that is certifications like CIS, they do give you a foundation. The problem is translating that foundation into real world actionable things. Right. That is the thing I find with CISSP. I've come across many, like when you're hiring people, everyone has a cert to say, right? There's plenty of certs out there that say, hey, if you do me, then you will know everything about security, right? And it's hard, and so take certs with a pinch of salt, right? Yeah. It gives you knowledge. It may tell you how to pass a test, but it may not tell you how to actually operate in the real world, like the most effective way you need to operate to secure your boundaries, secure your assets.
Right.
Right. And there are like lower cost kind of points of entry, things like Udemy courses. Like there's plenty of Udemy courses out there that teach you like how to be a pen tester, what that means, right? Obviously white hat versus the other kind that we don't speak of. But those are lower entry points for people who don't know what cybersecurity is, who want to kind of like taste the thing versus commit to either pivoting careers or spending hundreds of dollars on courses that give them a level of certification, a badge of honor.
Right.
Yeah. I'll definitely chime in here just because you guys I think you're both right, because I've kind of done each of what you both said. So I have plenty of Udemy courses, which look a lot like my Steam account. I have signed up for so many and gotten so many for free, and I'm still working down the list. But it's, there's some, you'll go onto Udemy, there will be completely entire free courses that are like $150, $200 are on sale for like $10. Wow. And you have unlimited lifetime access to that training. The other thing too, just a different way to kind of think about this, with everything that's happened to us as a community with over the last 400 years, right now, we are uniquely positioned that businesses actually want to help and invest in our potential aptitude. It has never been like this before. Like, if you want to go get training, there are organizations that are dumping training, scholarships, internships, associate positions to train you on the job, because there are 3 million positions open in this country for cybersecurity, and we cannot fill them fast enough.
Yeah.
Like, this is one of those fields where even a weirdo like me has a place in this industry. So if you've been on the fence about it, come on, we need you. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest there's sort of an up and coming, but focused on the minorities, in specific with Blacks, the International Consortium of Minority Cybersecurity Professionals. And as Ashley said, they have teamed up with a number of the different corporations, and they're sponsoring you to get those certs and the CISSPs and other types of things. So the barrier to entry, if you do have, the years and sort of the work, acumen, you can definitely get over that hurdle. And even as she stated, there's, some of the certs are even saying, we know that you're coming from a different type of background or technology or other type of an industry in order to be able to come right in. So they're even, doing bridge activities for you if you do go in there. So again, there's a lot of opportunity that I see as well right now, and that's specifically targeting and supporting, Blacks.
Yeah. And what about the early and the front end of the pipeline in terms of college student recruiting and intern programs. Can you talk a little bit, each of you, about how your company is approaching that in terms of a programmatic approach? Is there a whole group of folks that's doing it? Or is it something that the employee resource groups are doing it? Is it something that the recruiting has objectives for? Can you just talk a little bit about how your company goes about bringing young Black folks into the field?
Yeah, let me start, I guess. I have a summer intern program that I specifically, bring in people for, and it's I make sure that there's rotation opportunities in the SOC, in my incident response management area, my threat intelligence area and activities, and some of within the governance risk areas. So we try to rotate them into some of those particular, types of assignments. And then separately, working with, I believe it's Year Up, we have an ongoing program where we bring in specific to Blacks and we allow them, to gain that experience throughout the year. So they won't be in just an intern program, but they're able to actually work for us until they get, those rotations and acumen. Then we convert them, into some of our entry level types of roles and opportunities. My internship could be those with undergrad as well as in their master's types of programs, depending upon what the work assignment is. And I think that is critical to feed the pipeline and for me to make sure that there's, diverse team members and resources that can aspire, up for my type of roles in the future.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else on the early part of the pipeline, what your company is doing or could do better to feed that pipeline?
I'll jump in. Oh, if you want to go ahead, Mukesh.
Go for it, Ashley. Go for it.
Okay. So I'll just mention that as far as our internship programs, we have internships in every department at the company. And if there are concerns, I guess, working in cybersecurity because you have like an accounting degree or a history degree or something like that, we still need people that can market. We need people that can write. We need people who are personable. Like there's a place for everyone in cyber because every company still needs those traditional business functions that we talk about. So there, even to get your foot in the door, if you want to just get your foot in at a company, a way that a lot of us probably don't think about are like sales and like SE positions. You can get in the door at Palo Alto the fastest by coming in as like a business development rep. And once you've been here for a year, you can pivot and do other things at the company because we have a great internal mobility program. So while you're in school, working on certs, whatever, once you're in, you're in. And it's the first hurdle is just getting your foot in the door. So by all means, like I didn't think I was going to like being a trainer, but I did it because I was trying to work at this company and it worked out. But again, if you are going to a company that's a good, forward-thinking company, there will be tons of ways to leverage your various skill sets. So you don't have to, job hop anymore. Because I was a job hopper because I would only be able to utilize one skill here and maybe two skills here. I've utilized everything I've ever been able to do in my life at Palo Alto Networks. I have trained, I've led PT, from the military. I'm running one of our employee resource groups. Like everything in my life at this point is now being utilized at this company. So just another way of looking at it.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Mukesh?
I was going to say exactly the same things actually, and she stole my thunder. No. Pivoting is the name of the game. It literally is. Right? Bridgewater, like every enterprise organization, mature organization out there, has outreach programs to colleges, like campus visits, that kind of thing. We have an internship program and a graduate program that includes security positions as and when they become available, as well as kind of like investing in college programs like security college programs like NYU Tandem. Right, so I'm a mentor there, so this is kind of like waving the banner saying, "Hey, this is a great place. If you want to go to NYU Tandem, you should go there because their cybersecurity program is pretty fantastic."
I might be talking to you, Mukesh. I was looking at the program.
The pivoting thing, one of my friends, he was a mailroom. He was a mailroom clerk, became a risk analyst, right? He got it. He got it. Yeah, exactly. So, I think there was a film a long time ago, 1980s, not Trading Places, but similar to that, where a guy got in at the mailroom floor and then worked his way up, and that was the rags to riches story. And like, you get in on the ground floor, you're in there, and then you work to get to the position you want to be in because you're there, you're employed. You begin to develop a reputation for who you are as a person, but also the value you provide to the organization. And, that is where the money's at.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree with what Ashley's saying in terms of within the company, sometimes there's multiple roles. I've been with HPE, 26 years of service, always had new opportunities every couple of years or so. And our current, you may already know, our current CEO started off in the call center and literally, worked his way all the way up. And he'll tell the story that he didn't start off thinking that he would be the CEO, but it ended up being that way. And my next question on this topic of opportunities, Michael, goes towards somebody out there in this audience tonight has heard your story, has heard Ashley and Mukesh's story, and they have made the decision tonight that they're going to be a CISO. They're going to be a CISO, right? So that they've just set their goal. Now, I remember that there was a time when that was somewhat new, right? That it became the new definition. But the question I have, and I like each of you to talk about it, is where does the CISO sit in your organization? I've seen where it's sat down and reported up to some VPs and SVPs, and I've also seen it report directly to the CEO. So can you talk about where that CISO role sits in your organization and the interaction, Ashley and Mukesh, you have with that role? First, you, Michael.
Sure. It's kind of interesting because as you just described, it's all about the culture and the DNA of the organization. And where it sits, to me, is irrelevant. What's important is that it has to sit in a position where you get the right visibility and the right backing and exposure of the CEO and of your board of directors if it's a publicly traded organization. And so that could mean different areas. I currently sit and I report directly into our chief information technology officer. So we have a combined CIO, CTO leader that's over all of the technology in the organization. That person reports to the CEO. But when I go and I present and report to the board of directors and to the CEO and his executive direct team, I'm the person that is accountable for risk as it pertains to cybersecurity. I'm the person that signs off and where the buck stops within the organization. That's the critical component that needs to be there. Not every organization has that structure. I've been in the past reporting into a chief operating officer, who was the person that had all the operations, CIO, IT, and I was a peer within that particular stream. Sometimes it's combined with the chief information officer as a role within the CIO. There's a philosophy, though, that says because this is a risk area that you are reporting on, you want to be in a position that you can, shoot it straight, be very transparent, and communicate to the highest levels of the organization what the risk is and then how the organization needs to address that risk. Long as your structure is set up to be able to afford you that visibility and that autonomy in the organization, you will be successful in terms of your ability to execute.
Yeah, great. Wonderful answer. Thank you. So Ashley, Mukesh, where does it sit in your organizations and what's that relationship like?
So I know for me, so Palo Alto obviously is a cybersecurity company. And so the question always comes up, who watches the watchmen, right? So who watches us and make sure that we're doing the right thing? So we actually have a full InfoSec department within Palo Alto that handles our own internal security, practice.
Right.
And then as far as the CISO, our CISO is part of the C-suite at the company. So we are looking at this from as part of the overall strategic positioning of the company. Security is absolutely a part of it from day one. And so I don't actually get to interact with our CISO that much because we're a big cybersecurity company and it's ingrained in all of us, security first, always. So from a day-to-day kind of interaction point, I don't see the CISO that often. However, I do interact with a lot of the teams that speak to the CISO directly. So in a reporting structure, I don't directly interact with the C-suite, but the nature of what I do, I'm always talking to the C-suite. So I hear a lot about like what's going on and stuff. So it's kind of, it's an interesting spot to be in.
Yeah. Mukesh?
Going back to something that Michael said, the DNA of the culture of the organization and the culture. Security is part of that DNA. Like security, we made security everyone's problem at Bridgewater. And the reason that's important is because we're a relatively small organization that, compared to, Palo and others. But we want to make sure that everyone has their eyes open to what could harm us as an organization from the get-go. So security is a first-class citizen. And what that means is our CISO, our CSO, they report directly to the board. We have good synergies between technology and then security to make sure we're making the right decisions, both from an investment perspective, but also from a risk perspective. Like the things that we can't resolve and we must accept because it's the nature of just doing the business. And that's powerful. It means that the business is not pushing ahead of its skis and doing things that could harm us down the road because of potentially like a win now.
Yeah. Great.
And then from a interaction perspective, I do report into my CISO. I do have engagements with them on critical matters, right? The day-to-day, not so much, but critical matters, yes. Like this is a quantum of risk that we need to accept. There's a thing here that's a problem. Like, and going back to what Michael said, right? Like the buck stops somewhere, right?
Right.
It's like me educating that person that this is smelly, right? It could go sideways, right? Help me help you, right? And that's good, right? And like I think Ashley said it, Michael said it, and I'll say it again. Being able to translate like tech talk to business talk is the name of the game. Like you can communicate a complex idea in simple terms, then you're winning. Right?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you for that. I think we've gotten a view into your roles and responsibilities. Thank you for sharing some opportunities and ways to get in and taking some time to talk about your personal journey. And we started off with a foundation. We're going to move towards closing out by talking about some best practices. And I know some of those best practices shifted last year. We've all seen and may even had experienced situations where mom, dad, and all the kids are at home. The kids are doing school. Mom and dad are both working 2 different jobs and in some cases in the same room, right? So probably didn't even think about having to worry about their personal networks at home. But let's talk about some things that we can share with the audiences on some best practices. So let's start with some personal best practices that you can take. So who wants to jump in and give us a couple of tips? Yeah, go ahead, Ashley. Thank you.
So the first one I'm going to mention is actually less about your home network and more about what you do on the internet. So I actually do pen test work on the side. And the first thing I always look at is everyone's social media. When you've got pictures of your office, your home, what time you're gone, what time you go to get lunch every day, where your kids go to school, where you went to high school. You're giving me your bank account security questions. You're giving me a complete profile of your day-to-day behavior, and you're making it really easy for me to figure out the best way to launch an attack, because I don't have to even do any work to actually anticipate what you're going to do. And this is true for companies too. We put way too much stuff on social media, and most of the bad guys that are out there that are targeting us as individuals are using our social media against us. So be mindful of what you post. I'll just leave it at that, because I'm sure Mukesh and Michael are gonna hit the other things, but that's social media, man. That's the fastest way.
Ashley is 1,000% correct. And we brought in just for the emphasis, one of our FBI agents in one of the areas where I have my teams in the Atlanta market. And what he did was exactly what Ashley said. He just kind of, triaged, social engineered his way. And one of the leaders that was in the room with us and identified everything about that individual. And we didn't disclose, but the individual obviously knew what, and who they were talking about, taking it down to maiden name and that's all types of stuff. So I would build upon that to one of the next major areas that I would suggest is it deals with all the emails that you get and the whole phishing, because again, that's a vector and an entry point that I'm going to utilize if I'm out there and I'm trying to, to hack and download any kind of malware in your environment. I want you to click on that link, and if you've purchased something from Amazon or not. And if you haven't, why are you clicking on a link? Because you got an email saying, verify whatever. I mean, give me a break here. So there's some basic common sense on, the emails that everyone gets and personal ones. And once you are in somebody's database, and then they've also then have the ability to market to you, they're going to try to infiltrate you. So even in your work as well as your personal environment, do not click on any types of information that you would get in an email. And even if it isn't suspect, if it is an organization or something you have an interest, go and type in that separate URL and go look to see what it is that you're trying to get access to in the search. But the email piece for me is the kind of, the next basic, to communicate. And again, I could talk a lot more from the emails into text messaging and phishing and all kinds of other fun stuff. But the email is critical.
Yeah, great. Before Mukesh, you answer, I just want to take a moment to let everyone in the audience know that we will be taking questions. We are taking questions. If you have questions for the panelists, you can go ahead and pop those in now. But Mukesh, go ahead in terms of your personal best practices.
Sure, I completely agree with Ashley and Michael. Like, don't click links. Like, even if you receive links from people you know and trust, like they are the worst people to trust when they send you a link.
Yeah.
For gravity. The other things I like to do from a personal perspective is like use a password manager, right? Too many people out there have the same password for every account and every site that they sign up on. And it's usually the same thing, which is their dog's name and the year they signed up or the year they purchased the dog, and that's it, done. So just use a password manager, create unique credentials whenever you sign up for something. And if you want to go a step further, like the thing that I sometimes do is I have like one email account I use for like my banking stuff, right? All of that stuff. And then like I have like anything else where I know it's going to be spam and there's going to be a lot of spam. Like I use one of those accounts separate to that because I want to make sure that I don't have to deal with the spam on a regular basis. I can just let it go unless I'm interested. And then the other two things I think are important because people forget many sites out there have the notion of multi-factor authentication. Like if the site supports it and the data is precious to you, right? And this is important. If the data is precious to you, enable it, right? Like if you can, like one-time pins, QR codes, whatever it is that this site does, do it. And then the final thing I would say is back up everything. Like, for God's sake, just back up everything. Like I was in London like a couple of months ago, and I dropped coffee over my MacBook. And I was terrified. I had like probably a terabyte's worth of photos from like going back 10 years. I was terrified I'd lost those pictures, right? Terrified. Thankfully, I was able to recover those pictures and it worked well. But just back up things. Use like OneDrive, Box, Amazon Photos. Like if you have an Amazon account and you subscribe to their Prime, Amazon Photos is free to use, so use it. Even Time Machine if you have a MacBook.
Yeah. And what about when you travel for work? What are some best practices there? I remember when Wi-Fi first came on planes, and I just thought it was a lot of people thought it was so cool that you could send emails right from the plane, real time, right? So, but you're on that network, and then the same thing when you're in the hotel. So what else can you share around best practices for the way people compute? And you're holding up a cable, Ashley. Go ahead.
Do not plug anything into anything at the airport. This is called an OMG cable, and it looks just like a regular iPhone cable. And I've tested this theory to see how trusting people are. It is so easy to just like sit somewhere at an airport, and I literally bring a power strip and just plug in with this suspicious cable. And people are like, "Can I charge my phone?" And I just look at them and I say, "Don't ask people to charge your phone at the airport." I literally do it as like a public service, but I can load like malware. I can steal all your passwords and credentials from your phone. This cost me $10 and some time.
Yeah. Great.
Long layovers. I got nothing but time. I'm telling you.
What else on travel tips when you're in the hotel? You know.
Yeah. Look, I would say like most hotel hotspots, like the Wi-Fi network is going to be okay. Most well-known established vendors like Starbucks, you're going to be kind of like okay, right? It's when you go to the bodega or you try to join some random like hotspot that you see in public spaces. That's when you have to be a little bit careful, right? Yeah. Exactly. And then if you do join one of those hotspots, or even if you, regardless of whatever Wi-Fi network is, use a VPN. Like there are services out there that you can purchase. Your company probably has a VPN because they want to make sure that the way you connect into the environment is secure. So just do that, and you should be fine. Like a lot of this comes down to common sense. Like the weakest link is you, right? Just like if you wouldn't put your own personal devices on it, don't put your work devices on it. Right. That's kind of like my
showing pictures. I keep.
Although to be fair, there are a lot of folks that probably make the mistake of doing, personal stuff on their work computer or taking their work computer with them to do personal stuff. And that's a vector in and of itself. Don't let your kids use your laptop just because they got to get something done for school. Like, don't let your friend just check their Facebook. Like, don't do it.
Don't do it. You get to log out and whatever. Yeah. So again, I'll let the audience know that we're going to take questions, and I have one question on a topic we haven't touched on yet, and I see Chuck is coming on camera as well. Chuck, do you have a question before I ask mine?
No, not really. But it's interesting, and I do want to make this quick an analogy that I picked up when I was checking my Amex balance a couple weeks ago, and I've had this card since 1987. They know my username. All they usually ask me for is my password. But somehow or another, this landing page that was sitting in front of me is asking me for my username and my password. I said, that doesn't sound right. I mean, since 1987, they haven't figured out who I am.
Yeah.
There's a problem here. So I immediately backed out, logged back in, and then of course they asked me for my password. not my username. Anyway, so obviously somebody's trying to hit me up. This is just a couple weeks ago when we were talking about putting this program together. So timeliness of it, all that stuff is so important. But the reason why I jumped on John Bay, I saw a question on here. I didn't know if how to answer it or even to approach it, but someone was asking about, maybe that's what you were looking at too. Well, say something about covering your camera. Ashley,
I answered that.
Actually,
Yeah, I
that in.
answered that.
Not-
right.
That was a
Um,
recommendation.
Yeah, so covering your camera is kind of big. So I don't know how many of you folks know this, but there are like entire websites out there where people just sit there and rat a box. So basically infect machines, and then they just spy on people in their webcam and laugh about it on the forum. There are tons of websites like this, and usually the way that that's done is a rootkit or a remote access Trojan, or a rat, as we like to call it in the field. And so those are really hard to detect. And so for infected cameras, you have to be aware of that kind of stuff. So covering your camera obviously is the best defense, or just unplug it if it's possible. But behavioral threat detection is like the only real way to detect some of these like fileless types of attacks and exploits, where you can leverage a lot of that stuff, like infecting a microphone. So that's all. It's just clarifying that. So if you're like, what the heck is that? Hit me up on LinkedIn. I love talking about this stuff.
And it's not just like your machine being compromised. It's like big IoT devices, like baby cams.
Yeah.
Baby cams is a big thing at the moment. They're cheap. You throw them in there, you connect it to your Wi-Fi. And what you don't realize is it's a vector into your environment. Like Shodan.
I love Shodan.
I know
go to Shodan.io. They will give you a list of all the publicly exposed IoT devices, and some of those you can just go to, and over the web you can see something that you potentially don't want to see.
So right? Again, when in my role, everyone wants to. Usually, I get the what keeps you up at night. Well, I ended up in previous company, we had a consumer division, and we actually had the baby cameras in there. So I was on the Shodan, and our product was on, the list. I had one of the researchers that I had to do a coordinated disclosure with, and then the whole 9 yards. And again, exactly what, Mukesh had initially said, you have to design this in from the start. When you have obsolete legacy systems, operating systems that can't be patched and updated, that's where you run into a lot of the issues that we're talking about here, because those again are those openings that aren't maintained and updated by a number of different organizations. And so when they're not designing that code, or it's code that they've tried to replicate over the past 15 or 20 years, you're not going to have security built into it. So yes, I've been one of the ones that had to deal with the disclosure and deal with the whole baby cam, man.
Well, so as we come into the end, I know you got one more question that you want to, I see it here in the chat. Chuck, you can explain to the panelists.
What can you do?
Panelists, before you read the question, I want the panelists to start thinking about your key takeaways. What are the 2, 3, 4 things you want the audience to remember from the session? Thank you, Chuck. Now to the question.
Oh, no, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you in. I have my mic on. I'm good. It says, what can you do if your company has given your information away? And is it on the dark web?
Ooh, that's a fun topic. Yeah. So I know we hear on the news all the time.
It's a 2-part question. So what if you can do if your company has given your information away? I guess that's part of the question. Did anybody have an answer for that?
I mean, if so, one of the first things is that obviously, if everybody is here, they probably have personally identifiable information. Depending upon the type of information, it could be credit related, or it could be health related, which then applies to the HIPAA rules. As Mukesh said, there could be some people that are European citizens, and so then you get into the whole European GDPR and those types of requirements. So, but the company and or the organization, they have an obligation to you based upon the privacy rules and et cetera to give you that disclosure. So just as before we got on earlier, people were talking about the major, thing that happened with T-Mobile. So everybody was holding up their communication, information. If they were T-Mobile or Sprint, customers, they owe you that obligation and that communication. And typically then there's a requirements that they usually have. And I know because I do it from my position, where you can then get the appropriate type of credit monitoring and those types of elements put in place. So that's the first half. I think, Ashley can dive into, is it on the dark web and all that other fun stuff for you?
I mean, so something that I kind of had to make peace with myself. So I've been in the military, I was in the military for almost 15 years. So I was in both of those OPM breaches that hit the news, and all that data and everything was out there. And so you kind of have to I approach it from what threat hunters use, which is called the philosophy of compromise. Assume your data is already out there and do everything you can to protect yourself from that data being misused. If that is, making sure that you're always using a VPN on your phone when you leave the house, just because you got to protect the low hanging fruit. The easiest way that an attacker can take advantage of us is if we're not even doing the bare minimum to protect ourselves.
Right.
So that's kind of the big piece here. And so now, is it on the dark web? Probably. If you had a Yahoo account, just assume it is, honestly.
Yeah.
But I just always assume if you suspect there was a breach, or you heard about something somewhere, or there was a breach, a great website I recommend is called haveibeenpwned.com. You can actually plug in your email address and it will tell you what breaches that it was involved in. So you can then either, change passwords, or do what I did and start going through those user agreements and see what those companies said about availability and protections. And if they were negligent, get them to pay you for messing up.
Right. Read the fine print. Yeah. So, Chuck, I think we're at that point where we're going to wrap up. I want to take the opportunity to thank these panelists. This was definitely a content-rich discussion. I personally got a lot out of it. I hope the panelists also got a lot out of it, and I'm sure our audience got a lot out of it. But let's make sure that they have some things that we want, that they have some things to remember. So let's go around. Let's start with Michael, Mukesh, and then Ashley. What's some key takeaways from our conversation today that help demystify cybersecurity? Michael?
Yeah, I think, again, I go back to the connectivity that we talked about in the very beginning. So as you have technology, devices, and again, it's all about how I can go after that information. So I think that is something to understand when we're thinking about cybersecurity. The other takeaway that I would want to make sure that we highlighted, that we talked about, is there's a lot of different ways to get into this game. And, we talked about being able to pivot, being able to be willing to take that risk or that chance, or do the career turn where this might not have been, on your forefront. Now, as Ashley said, a lot of millennials, others, well, they got access to it. It's actually substantiated, but it might not have been on your path. But don't let that deter you. And still, if it's something that is of an interest, leverage what you currently have in your DNA, because even with cybersecurity and different organizations, as Ashley just pointed out, there's a lot of opportunities and there's a lot of money that is being spent and being looked at to cultivate for us to bring in, more Blacks and other minorities into this space. So those to me would be a good couple of starting points that I would want to have as key takeaways for everyone. Keep that open mind and make sure you're in a position to try to pivot. And then it's all about the information.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And Mukesh?
We're gonna find the unmute button. The thing that I would ask folks to take away is, when you approach a task, an activity, think about how you can make it a little bit better, make it a little bit more secure when you leave it alone, when you finish doing the thing. I think starting there is small, it's easy, it's transactable.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like it changes your mindset from like me just doing the thing to get it done and dusted to what would happen if something went bad. And that's a slow, gradual change. It's a muscle that most folks don't have, but actually myself and Michael have been practicing that for like 20 years. Like walking into a restaurant, what could go bad? Am I wearing a white shirt? What could go bad? That's I think the first thing. And the other thing is just keep on learning. Like, you know, like in your day-to-day job, like, just, Google search things, go into websites that are tech focused. They'll generally have a security kind of like arm where they kind of tell you about security stuff. And start reading like about the breaches and why those breaches occur, because they'll give you kind of like some level of base knowledge on the types of problems that most organizations face. And those organizations that face those kind of problems are probably kind of like pervasive across the arena. They'll have roles that they are trying to hire for, so that those problems are no longer problems of the now or the yesteryear, but of the yesteryear. That's kind of like the two things that probably like leave folks with.
Thank you, Mukesh. Ashley, you close us out, and we'll turn it over to Chuck after you.
Sure, man, both of you have such great things to say. I'm like, how do I even like have anything to contribute? The one thing I'll definitely say is that you don't know what you don't know. So as we're approaching, IT and cyber, and obviously we're trying to increase it so that there's more folks that look like us. If you find the one of us that looks like you, that's doing something that you want to do, reach out and say hi. I mean, you won't know what to do unless you ask questions. And honestly, the best thing I did for myself was find someone who was working in the industry, and I just started asking questions. What did you do? What certs did you do? Oh, what movies or what talks should I check out? All of that is going to matter. So don't be afraid of the word free in front of a webinar. All of that is valuable information. The second thing is to always wear sunscreen. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. I couldn't help it. The second thing is think about how what you're putting out into the internet can come back to bite you. I think that we tend to not be mindful, especially as, folks of color, we want to cut up and act out sometimes on social media, but everyone is watching all the time now. It's not like, 15, 20 years ago where you could do something crazy and there's a high chance no one was ever going to hear about it except the folks that were there. And that's not the case anymore. So as you continue to, move through your professional lives, be mindful of what you post. Yeah, I know we really want to like tear down that person that really thinks that racism doesn't impact all of us, but think about how that looks to folks that maybe don't understand the context or what it looks like from the outside looking in, right? Everything that you put into the world is going to come back to you some way, some form. So even on your professional networks, even on your own social media, put out the right things because you don't want that used against you. Think about police brutality. How is it that they always seem to find the one horrible out of context picture for someone that is killed by police violence?
Yeah.
Right. All of that can be used against you. So be mindful what you post. I'll end with that.
Thank you, Ashley. Back to you, Chuck, to close us out.
Thank you, John Bay. I'm going to make a departure from my normal closing comments because of this panel. One thing that I need to say right now, and I just celebrated another Leo birthday, and I can honestly say I'm proud of all four of you. I'm old enough to say that. I just really appreciate what you guys did tonight, what you gave. The committee that, or the community that we serve will benefit from all the words that you had to say tonight. I look forward to sharing with you the results of our survey. And the fourth platform was YouTube. I couldn't think of that for some reason. That shows you how old I am. But YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course, Zoom. So we'll have thousands of people looking at what you said tonight. And we always ask folks at the end of the program to send back in some suggestions, some thoughts, whatever have you. And I want to share this with you because you deserve that. You should know how good you really were tonight. I mean, it's my experience. I've been doing this for maybe 50 years. this was good tonight. It was very good. You did yourself and your organization proud, and I thank you for that. I thank I'm going to say Jen Hott with MBA Chic and Marvin Vasquez of Market Media USA, who were behind looking at all the questions coming in. I thank them for that. And we have a national conference, and Michael, you hit me if I didn't say this right. We have a national conference in Chicago on September 14th for a few days out that way. So if you want to come and meet some new recruiters or anything you want to come and join and hear some great speeches, come do that. On September 9th, we have a virtual career fair. Our chapter began virtual career fairs right when the pandemic set in. This is our 7th, I think, we're running right now. We get hundreds of talented people. We get Fortune 500 companies, plus the Federal Reserve, plus the FBI in attendance. So great opportunities for our community to come out and get some great career conversations and some opportunities for advancement and so forth and so on. So we're doing our best here in New York chapter. We're doing best we can nationally, and Michael will be a test to that, to try and make this all come together. And I can't say enough but to say thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
evening.
you for having us.
All righty.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. Be safe.